Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Yes Talks. The title of today's session is Yoga as an Instruction Manual for Life. And we have Anandhi ji with us today as our guest speaker. And I'll start by giving a brief introduction for her. Yogacharini Anandhi Mary Cecil is a devoted sadhak, master trainer, educator, and researcher dedicated to sharing the transformative wisdom of the Indian yogic tradition. She promotes a holistic approach to yoga that integrates physical well being, mental clarity, self awareness, and inner growth. And through her teaching, writing, and mentorship, she has inspired many to explore yoga not merely as a practice, but as a way of living with greater balance, purpose, and compassion. Welcome, Anandi ji. Namaste. We are so delighted to have you with us today on the Yes platform. Thank you for joining, and we look forward to a lovely session with you. Over to you.
Namaste and thank you so much. So I would invite all of you, let us just take a couple of moments to just introvert our awareness, center our mind, and calibrate our energies, mentally preparing for the sacred teachings that will be flowing across all of us as we go ahead with today's session. A special mention of Dr. Bijlani sir. Thank you so much for this honor. It is indeed a privilege for me to be on your beautiful Yes Talks platform. My beloved Guruji, my spiritual companion, Yogacharya Dr. Ananda Balayogi ji is also there with us. Guruji, thank you so much. And thank you for believing in me and being a support behind me, in front of me, around me, always. At times when I don't believe in myself also. So the topic that I'm going to be talking about today is yoga as an instruction manual for life. Now, most of us use a smartphone, right? We all use computers and we do use simple appliances, right? And each of this comes with a user manual. Why? Because without understanding the system, misuse becomes inevitable. Yet, human life, the most sophisticated system in existence, comes without formal training. It comes without a user manual. We are taught how to earn. We are taught how to compete. We are taught how to achieve. But rarely are we taught how to understand ourselves. You know, in our schools and colleges, we learn mathematics, we learn science, technology, economics, management, so on and so forth. But no one truly teaches us how to handle fear, how to process grief, how to deal with anxiety, how to manage desire, how to understand the mind, or how to remain inwardly stable amidst uncertainties. As a result, modern humanity has immense external progress, but increasingly internal fragmentation. And that is exactly where yoga comes in. Yoga is not merely a physical exercise. It is a science of human consciousness. It is a practical methodology for understanding life from within. And most of us are aware that the term yoga comes from the Sanskrit root yuj, which means to unite. And I will come back to this term yuj, to unite, towards the end of my talk. Yoga is essentially the process of bringing fragmented aspects of human existence into harmony. It teaches us how the body functions, how breath influences emotions, how thoughts shape perception, how habits become destiny, and how awareness can liberate us from unconscious living. Thus, yoga becomes a complete operating system for life itself. Modern education teaches us how to make a living. Yoga teaches us how to live. Today, many people are professionally successful, but internally exhausted. We have technological advancement, yet rising levels of stress, loneliness, emotional instability, burnout, and existential emptiness. Yoga addresses the inner dimension of life, the dimension that determines whether success becomes fulfillment or suffering. Yoga sees the human being as a multi-layered system. Now, there are many different scriptural ways of this classification. What I'm highlighting today is the Panchakosha Viveka from the Taittiriya Upanishads. And in this, what we see is that the human existence, the human being, has 5 progressive layers of existence from the gross to the subtle. Annamay Atma, Pranamay Atma, Manomay Atma, Vijnanamay Atma, and finally the subtlest most, the Anandamay Atma. Now let us look at the Annamay Kosha, the Annamay Atma, which is the physical body. This is the body made of food and matter. Everything in the physical body is borrowed from nature. The food we eat becomes blood, flesh, and bone. This layer requires movement, nourishment, sleep, rhythm, and balance. The yogic technique to fundamentally address this layer is asana. Yoga asanas were designed not merely for flexibility, but for nervous system stability, organ health, postural intelligence, and energetic alignment. Yoga understood that the body is the vehicle of consciousness. Subtler than the Annamaya Kosha is the Pranamaya Kosha, the energy body. This is the layer of vitality and life force, prana, which is regulated through our breath. In yoga, breath is not merely oxygen exchange. Breath is deeply connected with mental and emotional states. Just observe when angry, breath changes. When anxious, breath becomes shallow. When peaceful, breath becomes slow and deep. By regulating breath through pranayama, we indirectly regulate our emotions, our attention, and our nervous system responses. Subtler than that is the Manomaya Atma, the Manomaya Kosha, which is the mental, emotional layer. This is the layer of thoughts, emotions, memories, and reactions. We can call this the CPU, the central processing unit between the external and the internal world. Most human suffering happens here. Two people may face the same situation, but experience it differently. Why? Because perception shapes experience. The untrained mind constantly fluctuates between past regret, future anxiety, comparison, expectation, fear, and emotional reactivity. Yoga trains the mind to become clear rather than compulsive. The next layer is the Vijnanamaya Kosha, the Vijnanamaya Atma. which is our wisdom layer. This is the layer of discernment and higher intelligence. And as my beloved Guruji says, this is the layer where we have the power of choice. Kartum, akartum, ya anyata kartum. This is the capacity to observe life clearly without distortion. It allows us to distinguish impulse from wisdom, pleasure from fulfillment, reaction from conscious response. Modern information overload often weakens inner discernment. Yoga enhances inner clarity. The subtlest most layer is our Anandamaya Atma, the bliss layer, the layer of inner wholeness, wholesomeness, the subtlest most aspect of our being that we can touch through our limited human intellect. Now, when we talk of bliss, it is not excitement or pleasure. It is a state of deep contentment, independent of external conditions. And our sages, our ancient rishis and munis discovered that peace is not something created externally. It emerges naturally when inner conflict subsides. Now, the question is, if this is our true nature, that we are bliss, why do we suffer? And this is what I like to call as the root human error, the biggest problem of mal-identification, called avidya in yogic terminology. We confuse temporary experiences with our essential identity. We often identify ourselves with our profession and we say, okay, I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer, I'm a teacher, I'm a dancer. We identify with our social roles. I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend. We identify with our emotions. Someday we say, oh, today I'm happy. Today I'm very upset. Today I'm sad. We identify with our opinions. You may say, I'm a leftist or I'm right-winged. We identify with our achievements. Oh, I'm a topper. I'm a mediocre. We identify ourselves with our failures or even our mental narratives. But yoga asks the fundamental question, who is the observer behind all these changing experiences? Maharishi Patanjali says, you are not the fluctuations of the mind. Yogaha chitta vritti nirodha. He defines yoga as the transcendence of the modifications of the chitta. And what do we understand by the term chitta? The conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious, all the aspects of the mind. In other words, Jagrit, Swapna, Shushupti Avastha. Normally, mind behaves like a restless lake, constantly disturbed by thoughts, memories, desires, fears, and reactions. When the surface becomes calm, reality is seen clearly. Yogic culture speaks of this state as samadhi. It speaks of this state as turiya. Because when the surface becomes calm, as I said, reality is seen clearly. But what actually happens, everyday examples, one criticism destroys our mood, one fear controls our decisions, one memory can affect the entire day. This shows that most people are not living consciously. They are being psychologically driven by unconscious patterns. Yoga restores mastery over one's inner world. Guruji, I think you have typed something. And this is where I like to call yoga as an operating system for daily life. Why? Because yoga gives practical tools for life. It is profoundly practical. It is not escape from life, it is preparation for life. And let us look at some of the examples, some of the techniques that yoga gives us. For the body, we have asana, as I already mentioned. Asana builds stability, it builds resilience. Asanas are not merely stretching exercises, they cultivate patience, endurance, alignment, awareness, and neuroendocrine balance. The posture of the body affects the posture of the mind. For the breath, for the prana, we have the practice, the technique of pranayama. Breath becomes a bridge between the body and the mind. We all know chale vatam, chale chittam. Pranayama helps regulate emotional turbulence. Slow breathing activates relaxation responses within the nervous system. And this is why ancient yogis gave enormous importance to breath mastery. For the mind, we have practices like pratyahara, dharana, and dhyana, leading us to the state of samadhi. These practices train observation. Most people are trapped inside constant thinking. Dharana, dhyana, samadhi, which is called samyama, creates a gap between awareness and mental activity by developing the metacognitive capacity. And that gap is freedom. Instead of reacting compulsively, one begins responding consciously. Let us look at the example of the yama, the pancha yama for social harmony. These are the practices which restrict the subhuman tendencies, allowing transformation from subhuman to human. For example, ahimsa, non-violence in thought, word, and deed. Vak, manasa, and kaya. The only three aspects as a human being that we can work upon. Violence is not merely physical. Harsh words, resentment, and constant judgment also disturbs consciousness. Satya, another example, truthfulness. Living falsely creates inner fragmentation. Authenticity brings psychological coherence. Aparigraha, non-possessiveness. Modern culture teaches endless accumulation. We just know, as Guruji says, grab, 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 grab. Yoga teaches freedom from compulsive attachment. Possession itself is not the problem. If we look at our Vedas, uh, and if we look at our temple architectures, they were all beautifully dressed with jewelry, ornaments. So possession itself is not the problem. Psychological dependence is. Let us look at the niyama. Niyama are the inner discipline, those practices which enhance our human qualities, allowing transcendence. The two T, famous two T's, transformation and transcendence. Santosha, for example, is contentment. Contentment is not passivity. It is freedom from chronic dissatisfaction. Swadhyaya, self-study. Yoga encourages observation of habits, emotional triggers, patterns, conditioning, and ego structures. Without self-observation, transformation is impossible. I'll go back to my slide. I hope it is visible. Now, the next point I want to highlight is the science behind yoga. Because, in the present day, we want to validate everything scientifically. And here I would like to say that modern science is catching up. Ancient yogis explored consciousness experientially. Today, neuroscience and psychology increasingly validate these discoveries. The first example I want to give is the nervous system regulation. Yoga activates the parasympathetic, that is the rest and restore response. It reduces chronic stress and supports emotional balance. It improves heart rate variability. I think we all wear a smart watch nowadays, which is always telling us our HRV. It is a marker of resilience. Modern human beings often live in chronic stress mode. Yoga helps shift the body from survival mode to restoration mode. The second example I want to give is neuroplasticity. Yogic practices enhance self-directed neuroplasticity. Neurons that fire together, wire together. This is true of all yoga techniques because we are constantly challenging our brain. Regular yoga practice reshapes neural pathways. It enhances attention, memory, and emotional regulation. It strengthens the brain's capacity to adapt and learn. And finally, I want to highlight evidence-based benefits. Research shows meditation improves attention, emotional regulation, memory, and cognitive flexibility. It demonstrates improvement in stress, anxiety, sleep quality, and overall well-being. Mind-body practices influence both physiological and psychological health. And our rishis and munis, our sages discovered these through direct experience, what science is now beginning to measure and explain. The brain is shaped by repeated mental patterns. Yoga consciously reshapes those patterns. Another very hot topic that I want to highlight is the hard problem of consciousness. Most neuroscience has mapped the brain in extraordinary detail. Yet one profound question remains unanswered. What is the origin of conscious experience? And we see that phenomena such as near-death experiences, terminal lucidity, and what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness continue to challenge purely material explanations. Even among scientists, there is no consensus. Is consciousness produced by the brain? Does it emerge from complex neural activity? Or is it a more fundamental aspect of reality itself? Recent findings have deepened this mystery. Cases of remarkable mental clarity before death and reports of conscious experiences during periods of minimal brain activity suggest that our understanding of consciousness is still incomplete. Science is exploring possibilities, including the idea that consciousness may be fundamental rather than merely a product of the brain. And in this particular slide, I have highlighted a head-to-head experiment between two rival teams who spend years designing an experiment which has been published in Nature in 2025. The first case that they saw, example that they saw, was before death mental clarity. Dementia patients had sudden clarity hours before death, recognized loved ones, remembered years of lost memories. The third point is the 10 to 30-second window. During cardiac arrest, the brain loses electrical activity in that 10 to 30 seconds, yet thousands report vivid conscious experiences in that window. So the fundamental question that scientists are facing is that, does the brain create or does it receive? One camp says consciousness is produced by the brain and nothing else. And the other camp says that brain may act more like a receiver than a generator. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about David Chalmers. This is mainly his work. And all this information is there in public domain. Christoph Koch at Caltech did a huge, long, research over a long period of time where he explores the concept of panpsychism as a serious scientific framework. And he says that consciousness may be a fundamental property of the universe. It is not made from scratch. Brain does not create consciousness. Something brains participate in something deeper. According to him, 90% of the brain is still unknown. The brain is 90% unexplored. So what we are talking of in our day-to-day experience is hardly 10%. Actually, I think, Guruji, it's 6%. Science has not explained how or why we are aware. It has not explained it yet. Neither theory has proven their case, and the mystery remains for now. The journey to understand consciousness has only begun. Science is catching up, but the mystery is still greater than our explanations. And this is where yoga offers a fascinating and deeply personal perspective. Yoga begins where the scientific question becomes an inner inquiry. It suggests that our fundamental error, which I already spoke of, known as avidya, is identifying ourselves exclusively with the body, mind, emotions, and thoughts. Brain is nothing but a part of the body. The yogic sages asked a simple yet transformative question. If thoughts change, emotions change, and the body changes, yet the sense of I am remains. Who is the true experiencer? Through self-observation and meditation, yoga guides us from identification with the body to awareness of the mind, then to the witnessing awareness, and finally towards the realization of pure consciousness, which in yoga we call Purusha and in Vedanta we call Atma, the infinite self. Thus, science investigates consciousness as an object of study, while yoga investigates the conscious one, the experiencer. Together, these two approaches invite us into one of humanity's greatest explorations, moving from identification to realization, from the limited self to the limitless being. I'll just pause for a couple of moments, those who are interested to read through the slides so that you get to read through it. The real battle is internal. Human suffering is often self-created. External situations contribute to pain, but psychological suffering is amplified by resistance, attachment, expectation, comparison, and unconscious thinking. Yoga helps us witness experience without being imprisoned by it. And a very common saying in our Indian parlance is, all cause of suffering is karma. Blame it on karma. But karma is not punishment. It is a law of cause and effect. It is not reward, not punishment. It is psychological and energetic conditioning. Every thought, word, and action leaves an impression in the mind body system. Repeated thoughts become tendencies. What we think repeatedly, we start to feel and incline towards. Repeated tendencies become our personality. These patterns shape our character, our habits, and our reactions. Personality shapes destiny. Our inner patterns determine our choices and life outcomes, what in yogic culture we call the vritti, samskara, vasana, karma cycle. Yoga interrupts this unconscious cycle. Through awareness, discipline, and inner freedom, we create new impressions and transform karma. Awareness is freedom. Freedom is the beginning of new karma. The next point I want to highlight is yoga and relations. And here we have made a comparison between the agitated mind and what yoga develops. It highlights the relationships reflect inner state. Most conflicts arise not from events themselves, but from unconscious reactions. An agitated mind creates defensiveness, projection, impatience, and misunderstanding. Yoga develops listening, compassion, emotional regulation, and presence. And a very important contribution of yoga is the sense of purpose, finding meaning in life and living consciously. The modern crisis is that humanity has information but lacks wisdom. People today are overstimulated yet inwardly disconnected. Yoga invites deeper questions. Who am I? What is meaningful living? What is freedom? What is conscious action? And the answer that our Indian scriptures, our Indian knowledge gives us is dharma. Dharma is living in alignment with one's deeper nature. We've heard the word ikigai a lot, and there was a huge hue and cry about that term, but a lot of us misunderstand dharma as religion. Dharma is not merely religion, it is not your profession. It is participating in life consciously and responsibly. When action aligns with inner truth, life gains depth and integrity. Yoga is the journey from self-ignorance to self-realization. Dharma is the expression of that realization in this world. So, what is the ultimate aim of yoga, the ultimate goal of yoga? And this is where, remember, I had started speaking about union, yuj. Yoga is ultimately about union. Union means the dissolution of inner fragmentation. It means union between the body and the mind. It means union between thought and awareness. It means union between individual consciousness and universal consciousness. And the culmination of yogic evolution is what Maharishi Patanjali calls as samadhi or turiya. In fact, Maharishi Patanjali starts his Yoga Darshana from Samadhi and takes us to the journey to Kaivalya. Samadhi is not an escape from reality. It is direct experience of reality without distortion. It is profound clarity, silence, and expanded awareness. The journey of yoga is the journey from separation to wholeness, from ignorance to wisdom, and from limitation to infinity. The goal is not to become something new, but to realize what has already been true. Thou art that. Tat Tvam Asi. And in my opinion, yoga is the greatest technology. Humanity has mastered the outer world, but remains deeply challenged internally. Yoga is therefore not a luxury. It is slowly becoming a necessity. It is a preventive medicine because it strengthens body, mind, and nervous system before imbalance and disease arise. It is emotional intelligence because it helps us understand, regulate, and transform our emotions and relationships. It is inner science because it explores consciousness, attention, and the nature of the self. It is ethical living because it cultivates integrity, compassion, and responsible action. It is spiritual awakening combined. Awaken our deepest potential and connects us to the whole. Yoga does not ask us to escape life. It teaches us how to live life consciously, gracefully, and fully. So, the greatest technology humanity may ever discover is the technology of consciousness. Yoga Vidya is the knowledge base, Yoga Vidhi is the technology, and yoga is pragmatic, practical philosophy, the ultimate instruction manual for living life to its fullest extent. And what are we? Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat is reality, Chit is that which helps us perceive that reality, and Ananda is the bliss experienced from that realization. And with that, I would like to end my talk. Those who are interested in knowing more about us, I work with my beloved Guruji, who is there today, Dr. Ananda Baliyogi Bhavanani. And you can find details of us on sannidhi.yoga. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Anandiji, for your inspiring talk, for your beautiful insights. And we are truly grateful for the wisdom and clarity you shared with us today.